Well, thank you, my friends, for joining me. This is your host, ID Jester. So, I had posted a video on my channel about a month ago asking if there's anyone out there that might be looking to play Dungeons and Dragons together, to get together with a group of people and play Dungeons and Dragons. And I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who saw the video and thought, wow, I don't know much about Dungeons and Dragons. I've never played it. I know a little bit about it. It's a fantasy game with creatures and monsters and stuff like that. And I don't know much about it, so now I'm not really interested. But at its core, Dungeons and Dragons is a role playing game. So if we simply look at what the definition of a role playing game is, a role playing game is a game in which players take on the role of imaginary creatures who engage in adventures. So maybe what I should have said at that point, instead of saying who wants to play Dungeons and Dragons, who wants to play a role playing game with a bunch of friends out there? I think a lot more people would have been interested. They would have thought, a role playing game? Now that sounds interesting. We're going to be doing role playing. What exactly is role playing? I know you get together and you talk about things, but again, I'm not really familiar with role playing. What does that involve? Do I have to come dressed up? Do I have to create a character that has some kind of accent or has some kind of personality? So let's look at what role playing game is at its heart. If we just look at Dungeons and Dragons, for example, the core of Dungeons and Dragons is storytelling. You and your friends get together to tell a story. You guide your heroes through quests for treasures. You battle deadly foes. You make daring rescues. You have courtly intrigue and much, much more. So maybe what I probably should have said to get more people interested, because they don't know specifically about Dungeons and Dragons, or not that familiar. Maybe they haven't played it in a long time ago or whatever. And maybe I shouldn't have said, hey, let's get together and do a role playing game, because again, a lot of people probably have misconceptions about what role playing is, or they're not familiar with it. They've not ever done it. They're not really familiar with it. So what I probably should have said is, hey, is there anyone out there that would like to get together with a bunch of friends and create a story using a fantasy setting? I bet you if I would have said that, I would have had a lot more people interested and a lot more people that might uh, uh, wanted to join, and a lot more people that would be involved in our current setting and campaigns and adventures that we're doing here on my channel. But if you think about it, Dungeons and Dragons is just a fantasy aspect of a role playing game. And a role playing game is nothing more than storytelling between players and the game master, or in this case, the dungeon master, because we're playing Dungeons and Dragons. So that leads us to where and how, what is exactly role playing and telling a story, for those that are not familiar with what exactly is role playing. Role playing, again, is just simply the fact that you are taking control of a character in whatever role playing setting you're using, whether you're using Dungeons and Dragons or you're using Starfinder, which is a sci fi uh, role playing game, or you're using Call of Cthulhu, or you're using Lord of the Rings, or you're using any kind of system. The system basically just gives you the rules and the explanations about the fantasy setting that you can use to kind of guide the setting along. It's not the role playing part of it. The role playing part of it is just the players and the dungeon master working together to create a story together with one another. And that's all that Dungeons and Dragons or Star Wars RPG, Pathfinder, Starfinder, or any other role-playing game out there, if you're interested in a certain genre, there's a system for you. If you're interested in 1920s gangsters, or if you're interested in sci-fi, or you're interested in anything, there's a system out there for you. There's players, I'm sure, that you could find online that would be interested in getting together with you and playing. So whatever your favorite setting is, I'm sure there'll be a game system to match you. And again, the game system is just the core rules so players know how to create their characters and what all their different abilities do and how they interact with one another and how their abilities and special powers change the core rules. That's basically all that all the manuals and the books and everything do. It's up to the dungeon master or the game master to create an adventure for the players. The players, they are going to be in control of a character. They're going to create someone else that they are going to control, whether that be Luke Skywalker, Bilbo Baggins, or any other creature from any other story, any other person that you know, like any of the Lannisters, or like I said, Bilbo Baggins, or Gandalf the Grey, or Conan the Barbarian, or whatever your setting you're playing in, you can find some kind of a person that you can relate to. That okay, this is okay. We're playing in a fantasy setting. I want to create a halfling character that's kind of like Bilbo Baggins, or maybe I want to be a magic user like Gandalf the Grey, or I want to be a ranger character like Strider. Whatever your setting is, you're going to create a character, and the character is going to have special abilities and special powers. They're going to have stats. They're going to have abilities. They're going to have equipment. They're going to have all this stuff. And basically all you're going to do is listen to your dungeon master, and then you're going to reply and talk with them and create this story about what is happening to your character. Not you. This is not happening to you personally. It's happening to the character that you're controlling. So because of that, there are several wonderful things that can happen. Number one, you, the player, can experience great and wondrous things. You can go to lands that you had only dreamt about. You can fly through the stars. You can battle the forces of evil. You can take on creatures that are deathly evil. You can fight the hounds of hell. You can do all these wonderful and amazing things because it's not actually happening to you, it's happening to your character. And you are leading this person, this persona of yourself in a far off world, and you're leading this person through an adventure. The great thing about role playing is, as we talked about, one thing is you can experience all these wonderful and different things that you can't actually do in real life. The second wonderful thing about it is you have full control of what happens because you're interacting with your dungeon master and your other players to create this story. The dungeon master will tell you what is going on around you in your environment. He will give you examples. He will tell you what horrible creatures are there. He will tell you what's around you. But it's up to you to decide how things proceed with your character. If you walk into the Temple of Doom and there's a creature standing there, you can turn around and run away if you want. You can go in and fight it. You can do whatever you want. That is one of the wonderful things. If you are ever reading a fantasy novel and you get to a chapter in the book and you think, oh my gosh, I would not have done that. That's ridiculous. That's stupid. Why would this character do that thing? And it kind of turns you off. Or you're watching a sci-fi movie, or maybe you're watching the new Star Wars movie and you're like, oh my God, this is horrible because I would never have done that. My character wouldn't have done what that character did on the screen. This story is not going where I want it to go. I'm not interested in this movie anymore. I'm not interested in this series anymore because it's not what I would have envisioned the story to go towards. I would not have envisioned this character doing the things he's doing. I would have done something so much different. With a role playing game, you have full control over what happens in the story. You can bend it and weave it however you want to do with your fellow players. You talk with them, you converse, you decide what to do as a group, and you proceed on through the adventure how you plan to do it. You can either the other thing with role playing is it lets you experience the highs and the lows of good and bad things happening to your character. And everything will be part of the grand story that goes on. If your character ends up dying, unfortunately, in this adventure, you can embrace that. You can embrace what had happened in the story and bring in a new person that might go and seek revenge. Maybe it's your original character's twin brother who learns of his brother's demise and now he must seek vengeance for that person. The possibilities are endless. The only thing stopping you is your imagination and your desire to participate in a role playing experience. I think, as I originally talked about in my well, before we go there, let's continue about character's death. So, if you think about character's death, it's all part of the grand story that you're telling with your players, your other players, your character, and the dungeon master. Bad things can and will happen, and if you look at any good series of science fiction or fantasy or mystery or horror or anything like that, good things happen and bad things happen. It's how the characters respond to those good and bad things that make an interesting story. It makes things drives the story forward. It makes people interested in watching. It makes people interested in continuing reading the book or buying the next book in the series. It's the highs and the lows, the good things you've experienced as well as the bad things. Characters might die. It's a risky business now. They're going up and fighting a dragon or taking on the Death Star or whatever your genre is that you are enjoying. A good murder mystery. Maybe your character has been found out by the bad guys and they've encased you in a coffin and thrown you off the ship and now you're sinking to the bottom of the ocean. Whatever the scene is, whatever that is. It's part of the grand narrative to the story. You are not playing you are playing a character that's part of the grand story. And you're engaging with other players to continue the story forward. And if something bad happens, you embrace that. Maybe the players all are defeated by the enemy, and now they've been locked up in the bottom of the Death Star in the prison. Well, sounds like, oh, this adventure's over. No, it's not. You can embrace this and challenge yourselves to find a way out, to find the next motivation for your character. What is they going to do to get out of the situation they're in to further the story along? Anything is possible as long as you make it possible through the way you act in your character in the story. So character death, again, if we look at any good science fiction or fantasy setting, characters die. Gandalf the Grey died. We know that. Han Solo dies. Darth Vader dies. I have not watched Game of Thrones that much. I've watched the first season, okay? So I can't give you, exactly. I'm hoping to watch some more Game of Thrones, but yes, it's on my list of things to do. But I'm sure there's lots of characters in Game of Thrones that die. Does the series end? Does it stop at that point when that character dies? No, the story goes on. You are still part of that. So even though you are controlling a character, you, the player, are involved in expanding on the story and continuing on because you're enjoying the story with your players and your dungeon master and continuing on. Like I said, you bring in another character. That player death can be a great and wondrous thing. In fact, failure is a wonderful thing for everyone. We grow from it, we learn from it, we get to experience great and wondrous things from it. Failure can bring on things in tension. What's going to happen? The dragon is coming. We can't stop the dragon. What are we going to do? We are in deep trouble. Building suspense, building tension. When the orc hordes are outside Minas Tirith and they are attacking, the doom is here. They have arrived, and now they're going to be. We are going to be on. We are now in a life and death situation. Everything matters. Every dice roll that I make is extremely important. So, yes, a failure can be a wonderful thing. You experience the highs and the lows when you finally rescue the princess and you are successful and you bring her back to the king. You are rewarded. Your characters are rewarded with great and wondrous things for your efforts and your risk and everything that had happened to you along the way. And your characters earn renown and favors from everyone and all that. But it's not only just your character. You as the person are rewarded with an experience, something to talk about with your friends, something to engage with and be a share with everyone you know. And things you will think about for many, many years to come. I can think back, several decades of playing and thinking about things that had happened to certain characters and the fun and interesting ways that the story unfolded that no one had ever predicted was going to happen, even the dungeon master, because the players did something that was totally unexpected, or the players were completely thrown off because of they were not sure that what was going to happen. They were playing in a fantasy setting. They were investigating some old ancient ruins, 500-year-old ruins, and they were built by the druids to protect the lands against the dragon. As the players are investigating the ruins, they activate the portal, which then takes them 500 years in the past, and suddenly they are there with the druids who are building this sacred holy place to protect the lands from the dragon. Mind blown. Oh my God, what is going on here? Epic story moment. And that's what role playing is all about. It's telling a story about what's happening with your character, living it through yourself, and enjoying the moments that you share with the other characters. Now, a lot of you are probably thinking, "Oh, I can't do this. I don't know how to role play." I mean, I understand what you're saying, ID Jester, and I know that, but I don't. I've never created any. I've never written anything fantasy. I've never, done any sci-fi. I'm not quick-witted. I'm not all this. Okay. Let me tell you a couple facts. The fact is, humans communicate through speech by talking, right? We all know that. That's simple. But what most people don't realize is every time you speak, every time you say something, you are either sharing and giving out knowledge or you're asking for knowledge in return. If you go out with your girlfriends to the bar and you're hanging out and you're talking back and forth, think about it, right? What's happening? Oh, yeah, I met Bobby the other day and we were doing this. And oh, what is it? Did you get your carpet replaced in your house? You're either asking for information or you're telling somebody what had happened. If you're telling somebody what had happened, you are giving them a story. Yes, oh, you can't believe it. You know what happened? The carpet guy showed up. They weren't prepared. They ripped out the old carpet and they tore up part of the wall and blah, 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 blah. We as humans, we don't know this because we don't think about it, but if you comprehend, role playing is nothing more than telling a story. Well, we do that all the time by just talking to one another. I'm either asking you for information by my words or you're giving me information by your words. It's one way or the other. I'm either giving you information or I'm asking for you for information. So you are role playing. Now, not in the technical sense are you role playing, but you're basically role playing is nothing more than telling a story with your friends. You're doing that all the time anyways. I am on all of our YouTuber communities out there, and I'm on all their different channels, and I've watched, and we have Dog Sidious, and we have Stratomatic Delaware, we have Retro Sports Network that are doing a great job in our 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons adventure. And they're learning and growing as players and understanding what's going on. And we've had some growing pains and stuff. We don't expect everyone to be an expert. But as I explained to them, and I'll explain to you to give you some good examples, if you go to Dog Sidious's channel, he does a really great job of doing a Final Fantasy XIV live stream where people can come in and watch him play Final Fantasy XIV. And again, Dog, don't be mad at me. I'm just using you as an example, okay? But he plays Final Fantasy XIV. He spends 2.5 hours in his live stream talking about what his character is doing. Tells us all about his character, tells us all about what they're doing, all their different powers and abilities, all their different equipment, everything. That, my friends, is just like role-playing, because you're doing the same thing. You're sharing information, you're talking about what's happening, and you're giving people information about what's going on with your character. That is as simple as what role-playing is. You're telling specifically the Dungeon Master, if you're not doing live stream, but you're telling people what your character's doing, what powers they have, what equipment they have, what special abilities they have. You're talking about what they're doing while you're doing it. That's what role-playing is. That's as simple as it is. I know there's a lot of sports simmers that I belong to. A lot of your channels, Retro Sports Network does the same thing. Sports simmers, I know Stratomatic Delaware, those two guys do a lot of sports sims. Again, when they are giving you and talking to you during their videos or live streams, whatever they're doing, they are creating the story and telling you what's happening during the game, right? Frank Tarkenton steps back. He throws the pass. It's complete to Ahmad Rashad, who's going down the sideline. He's pushed out of bounds at the 33-yard line. That's a gain of 13. It's going to be first down and 10 for the Minnesota Vikings. You have just created a story by just talking and sharing your information. That's as simple as it is. That's why when I originally decided to introduce or ask people if they were interested in playing Dungeons and Dragons. I was hoping to get a lot of YouTubers out there. I did end up getting 3 of them, which is great. Of course, we have Dylan Dew and Herb Pilgrim, not to leave them behind. I just can't give you a specific example for them because they don't own a YouTube channel, but they're doing the same thing and they're learning and growing as players as well. But at the core, role playing is nothing more than telling a story. Telling a story is what we do all the time, whether we know it or not. All right, well, we have Manny Machado is going to step up to the base here. It's, on the hill is going to be. Justin Verlander. But Verlander has got 287 strikeouts this season. Machado is 0 for 2. Here comes the pitch and the windup. Roll the dice. On the card, we look at the card. The card says ground out to first base. But for our role player or our live streamers out there, they don't just say, oh, it's a ground ball out to first base. They say, okay, he hits it down to second, and Altuve picks it up, throws it to first, and Machado's out. Just got him by a step. What you've just done is role play because you've told a story about what is happening to the characters that you are dealing with. That's as simple as role playing is, and it's not any more complex than what we've just talked about. Now, most people think of role playing as you have to come to the game, you have to have some kind of accent, you have to act crazy, you have to be weird, no. You don't need to have an accent to role play. You don't need to act weird. You don't need to have all that. You can add that to your character. If you understand your character, you know what their background is. You know what kind of accent they would have. You know what they, where they grew up, what kind of heritage they have, what kind of personality they have, their flaws, what they like, what they don't like, everything about them. And you want to add all that stuff, that is fine. But role-playing in its basic form is nothing more than telling the Dungeon Master what your character is doing and how they interact with the story. When the DM says you go into a room, you see a 25 by 25 foot stone room. In the center of the room, there's a statue, a gold statue of a bear. The bear's eyes are gleaming red with rubies in them. So it's up to you now to decide what you're going to do. You can completely ignore what the DM just said and do your own thing. Or you can say, I'm going to walk up to the bear and pull out my dagger and see if I can pry those rubies out of his eyes. That's as simple as what role-playing is. You just explain what you're doing to the DM, and he will then give you the information back as to what happened. At that point, the Dungeon Master might say, well, you know what? Give me a dexterity check as you try to weave your knife into the sockets of the bear's eyes. And let's see if you can get those gems out. You will roll a dice. The dice will either determine you have failed or you have succeeded. Based upon your failure or your success, you then can decide how that plays out in the story. So let's assume you had failed. Anything could cause you to fail, but it's up to you, the player, or the DM, to decide how that failure happened. Did you drop your dagger and it fell down on the ground? Maybe the tip point of your dagger broke off as you're trying to wedge out the gem. If you succeeded, again, if you have a success, it's up to you as the player to determine what you do and how it was successful. The dice only show us whether it was a success or it was a failure. It's up to the players and the Dungeon Master to weave those results into the story. If you were successful, yes, I've grabbed two large rubies out of the bear's eyes. I'm going to throw one over to my elf companion over there, and I'm going to pocket the other one. And we move on. The dungeon master will then say, okay, well, you leave that room, you enter down the hallway. As you are proceeding down the hallway, something is amiss as you smell smoke suddenly, and down the end of the hallway, there is a door. Suddenly, the light flashes from under the door edge. You can see that a torch has been lit all of a sudden. What do you do? Once again, it's up to you as players to decide what you do. Do you turn around? Do you pull your weapons? Do you yell out and say, "Hail, creature!" or "Hail, monster!" Whatever. Bad examples, but "Hail! We come in peace. We're only here to find our friend. If you be friend or foe, announce it now." Boom. You've now interacted. You've told the dungeon master what you have done. It's up to the dungeon master now to reply and say what happens. The door suddenly flings open, and standing there in the hallway is the long-lost companion. He looks to be wounded. He's carrying a torch. And the story proceeds from there, etc., etc. Again, I'm just giving you a fantasy setting. But you could use any setting: Star Wars, Star Trek, Call of Cthulhu, Pathfinder, Starfinder. I'm just trying to think of, there's systems for every kind of genre you can imagine, and they're all wonderful and great. The biggest thing is you just understand that role-playing is not something to be nervous about, something to be afraid of. Something that I've never done. I don't think I can do it. You've done it all your life, whether you know it or not. You continue to do it every day. All you're doing is sharing and giving information back and forth, which every time you speak, you're doing. And you should be able to proceed that into any kind of role-playing game, whether it's fantasy or science fiction or anything in between, murder mystery or horror, whatever it happens to be. So I think role-playing gets a kind of an unknown answer when most people think about it, because they just don't know the core concepts. And that's the reason for this video, is just to introduce role-playing to you guys, kind of explain it in a manner that I think a lot of people don't think about or understand. But as my players have been experiencing for the last couple weeks during our adventures, role-playing is nothing more than getting together with people and talking about the story, about what's going on with your characters in that story. It's as simple as that. You don't need to be a professional Dungeons and Dragons player. You don't need to know every single rule, every single feat, every single skill. That is not a requirement to play the game. You have to have a basic knowledge of what you can do and what you can't do. You have to have some understanding of the mechanics of the game. And that's it. That's all you need. Everything else is up to the dungeon master to decide what happens, and if you need to make one of those dice rolls to find out if you're successful or if you failed. That's it. That's all role-playing is. It's as simple as that, and I cannot make it any simpler. It's the fact that you're telling a story, enjoying playing with other players, and enjoying the story that you are creating. With the help of the Dungeon Master, you weave your story together, and you create hopefully a memorable and exciting story that people will want to watch, people will want to read about, things that you will think about for decades to come. And that's as simple as role-playing is. If you have any thoughts, your comments, suggestions, please let me know in the comments section down below, and I appreciate that. I'm just hoping that because I'm going to be introducing secondary group options for people out there. And when we talk about trying to get more people involved and people that might be interested, I want peers, when they look at, uh, you know, if I say we're going to be playing Dungeons and Dragons or whatever it happens to be, whatever system it is, we're going to be playing a role playing game. I want you to think about, I don't know much about a role playing game, but now ID Jesters explained it. It doesn't seem like something that's very hard to do. It's certainly not. Trust me on that. Anyone can do it. Anyone can be proficient in it. Anyone can play. Anyone can enjoy. Anyone can create. You don't have to have the most vivid imagination. You don't need to have the quickest mind. You just have to be able to enjoy the moment and involve yourself in the story. And if you can do that, which everyone out there can, some are proficient. They will come with accents. They will come with character backstory. They will understand. They will name their weapons that they use. They will know that every third swing, their character needs to take a breather or whatever the situation is for that character. Whatever, they know everything inside and out. You just need to understand your character. You have to understand their personality. You have to understand their views and their goals. This person you're playing is not you. All you have to do is understand them, and you can then participate in a role-playing game. As long as you understand the basics of the game, you understand the basics of the mechanics of the game, the Dungeon Master will lead you and tell you what you need to do. Roll an arcane skill check to find out if you recognize these symbols on the wall. Based upon your success or your failure, you will find out whether or not you know what those arcane symbols on the wall are. You will then use that information to further the story along. This symbol here is how to defeat the dragon, or maybe it's the dragon's name. We now know the name of the dragon. We can find it and seek it out. Or maybe it's some history, maybe some lore about the world, maybe it's something about one of the characters. They are reading this arcane symbol on the wall, and you find out that your name is on the wall. Whoa, what? Anything and everything is possible as long as you are willing to put the effort into the game. Thank you all. We'll see you guys next time. Appreciate you watching. Appreciate your comments. Hope everything's well until we get together again. Take care.